I'm in Rehoboth right now.
Oh, nice.
We came back. We haven't been here in many months. But we just got back, and it was making me think about being here for 10 months over COVID.
That is crazy. So let's talk about that for a sec. So right now we're still in the midst of living through like a really big event in history, and it's hard to have any perspective on it. But going back, you spent the majority of the time during COVID with your family. Now, your kids were there too, and your kids are really young.
It was crazy. I mean, now they're 5 and 10, but when we came here in March of 2020, Danny was 3 and Winnie was, 8, I guess. And I mean, she was in nursery school, but I was thinking about it because the New York Times had, because it was the 2-year anniversary of when New York City shut down.
Yeah.
There have been all these articles and amazing photos of like the timeline of, what happened when the city shut down and everything that happened, between now and then. And it was occurring to me that I feel like everybody remembers where they were when the country shut down. Yeah. And like everybody remembers where they were. Everybody remembers where they were on 9/11. Everybody remembers where they were when Princess Diana, died. Like there are these like moments in my life, at least, that I remember where I was. I remember where we were sitting watching TV when Princess Diana died, actually here in Rehoboth many, many, many years ago. And we were in our office. I remember, Gene, when de Blasio said something like, it might not be a good idea to take the subways to work right now. Yeah. And I remember thinking, well, if everyone can't take the subway to work, how are people going to get to our office? Yeah. And Adam and I just remember the whole snowball being like, well, why don't we tell everybody, let's just go home for the weekend. Take your stuff just in case we can't get back on Monday, and we'll just assess the situation after the weekend. And that was basically the last time I was in the office.
Eric.
I remember being on a Zoom or a FaceTime at the time with my girlfriends, which I'd never done before. I had a Zoom with my girlfriends. And I remember thinking, and we were discussing, are we going to be like this for the next 2 weeks? Like, I can't live like this for 2 weeks. And lo and behold, it's been 2 years. And so it's just, so what we did was we left the city the next day, and we took our kids, we took our dog, and we came to Rehoboth Beach, which is where my parents live, and they have a house. And they said, just come for a few weeks and we'll be safe here. And we felt really lucky that we had a place to go like that. Yeah. Lo and behold, we were here for 10 months, and there were 9 of us here in the household at the time. For 9 months. We had to live here for 9 months.
That is so wild.
And we started to document it, because one of the things that I wanted to make sure was that we didn't forget these moments, and we didn't forget the craziness that we were going through. We didn't forget about the fact that we were washing groceries when they came to the front door. We would leave groceries outside for 3 days. Remember that?
Oh, wiping down. I'm still in the wipe down mode. I still do that just for the sake of it.
And we took a walk into town. There was not a soul on the streets. Yeah. There was nobody. It was a ghost town. And then these people started walking down the street, across the street from us, across a whole street. And we turned and walked the other direction. Like, that's how afraid of being near people we were. It's these moments that we want to. So we started writing down all of the different things that happen. And I feel like it's really important, because in 40 years from now, these are going to be the stories that our kids and our grandkids are talking about. And it's just really important to think about how do we preserve these special moments?
I think recording them, because when you mentioned September 11th, it's true. Like, I think about it. I mean, we just had the 20th anniversary, and I remember waking up, and it wasn't watching it on TV. It was seeing actually in real life, pulling up the bedroom curtain and looking and seeing towers on fire, seeing the second plane hit. And it's strange how that one day, the trauma from that, of being in the city and knowing, like, for example, Adam living down in Tribeca at the time, and people I knew that were down here, and people not knowing where anyone was and not knowing what to do. And it's strange how that feeling of watching it unfold, and most people seeing it like on television, or people that were in DC at the Pentagon, people that were in Pennsylvania where the other plane went down. It's strange how, even though it happened 20 years ago, it really feels like I could go back to that moment in my head as if it was right now. And remembering those things, it made me think back to opportunities I missed to talk to, like, my grandparents about, like, what was it like Pearl Harbor? Because right now, like, we watched September 11th, like, whether you were in the city or anywhere, you watched it unfold in real time. You know, we're watching certain things unfold in real time. But, like, at a time where you had radio broadcasts and newspapers and the president giving a speech over that, like, what was that like to actually experience it from someone in your family, as opposed to, you know, reading about it historically? Like, what were they actually feeling? And a lot of times, you know, we have lost a lot of people from that era that we may not have gotten their stories from. And it's interesting to find that out.
We're living through a moment in history. Our kids are living through something that they will be talking about to their kids and their grandkids, right? They were the first group of kids ever in the history that had to have school canceled for 2 years, that had to wear masks in schools in the United States, that had to be on Zoom, where, you know, my kids were in school where their teachers were Zooming in at one point, right? Like, this will be a moment that is never forgotten. Mm-hmm. And how do you start to think about things now, so that in 20 years from now, or 30 years from now, or 40 years from now, you can pass down these memories to the next generation. People
that miss their graduation, people that all of a sudden, when they're having kids, because that's what's interesting to think, that people from September 11th, like, there's people born after, like, 20 years ago, and now that it's still kind of in the thick of it, and we don't really know what the situation is, because things go down, and we have, like, it could be these ebbs and flows. Here's a question I have. So is there, like, okay, we talked about, like, these major historical events that affected, like, the world. Are there any moments, like, even historical, that happened outside that really had an impact on you, that, like, something that obviously could have been a big deal somewhere, but for some reason it stuck with you really well? Like, it shaped how you thought about things, how you felt about things, how you may have viewed a certain issue or a certain aspect of your own life. But I remember getting home late one night. I was out with some friends, and I'm watching, and the Olympics was in Atlanta, and it was when that bombing happened. And it was so strange, because I was like, is this real? Like, what's going on? And no one knew. But another instance was waking up one morning, because I was, you know, in college or around there, sleeping on my couch, waking up at weird hours, falling asleep with the TV on. And I woke up and I see this horrifying building that exploded on the Today Show. And it was Oklahoma City when that happened. And I remember being so confused, thinking, what movie am I watching? Am I watching some TV? What's on TV right now? And it took me a while to realize that this had actually happened in real life. Like, I still remember that moment. And then it was so terrifying to think that something like this could happen. Like, I guess for me, I was always worried about those types of things. I always thought, like, when it comes to terrorism, when it comes to horrible events, living in New York in '93, knowing the first time they tried to take down the Trade Center, it was always this kind of weird feeling I had. And then seeing that Oklahoma City thing happen, it really stayed with me, in a sense that I'm sure people in Oklahoma to this day are still really traumatized and bothered, especially how horrific the casualties were at the time. And it was one of the first times where we saw this happen in America. And it really stuck with me. And someone might say, well, you're in New York, that you've never even been to Oklahoma City. And I'm like, yeah, but there was something about that really, like, every time there's the memorial, I always read up on it. I like to, you know, learn about the people that we lost during those events. You know, I still do that. Every time I walk past a firehouse in New York City, I always look at the plaques to see what firefighters we lost that day, any first responders. Like, it's things like that that has become kind of a part of when I'm walking around New York. If I'm in a neighborhood that I haven't been to that fire department and I just see one, I'll always cross over and just look at the plaques and see things like that. Because I feel like those things have stuck so personally with me, even though at times I wasn't actively involved in those. And I think a lot of times if people go to memorials, if they go to, certain war memorials, like, the one for the Vietnam one in DC or any of those, and you kind of get a sense of, when I think of people, there was this whole thing about statues and those things, but it does make you kind of think and maybe look into these events, because I think it's important to remember them, even if they seem like they didn't affect your life personally, because it's interesting how people are affected by so many different things that you don't even know. I mean, right now in my neighborhood, it's called, Little Ukraine. So I'm so used to all these Ukrainian restaurants, Veselika, where we always love their soups, the Ukrainian restaurant next door, and seeing that they're going through something right now that is incredibly historical. It's so tragic to see this stuff. These people that, I've been around for 30 years, the churches around there, and those types of things, you do want to know more about those histories, and maybe it makes you a little closer to the events, even if you're not personally affected in the way that some of these people are.
Yeah, for some reason, this particular event has really obviously gotten to everybody. But it's just terrible to watch, and it really hits close to home. My grandmother was from Kyiv.
Yeah,
and so for all intents and purposes, my family is part Ukrainian, and we've been just watching the news constantly and trying to think of what can we do to help. My kids, us, we've been having dinner time conversations around ideas for ways that we could help. We've been trying to find the right organizations to donate to. It's just right. This is going to be another event that my kids are going to remember, and these are important. It's important to think about as we're going through them. We actually a few weeks ago we cooked a large meal for 2 Afghani refugee families in Washington, D.C. And I will remember this. I will remember this night for forever, because first of all, we cooked Afghani food, which we didn't quite understand why the organization that organized this was having us cook Afghani food. We're like, really? Shouldn't we cook like lasagna or something, something that
you're really good at cooking?
But okay. And it ended up being this amazing experience because we followed up. They gave us the menu to cook, and it was like 5 things. I mean, I could tell you what they were, but they were, and we cooked them and they were amazing. Well, we thought so. We're like, they probably are like, yeah, like my grandmother does better. But we went over to our family friend's house, who actually, Gene, it was Melanie's house.
Really? We love Melanie, mentioned in the book many times.
She's mentioned in the book many times, and Melanie is amazing. So first of all, she offered up her house. She has a big kitchen, and we brought the ingredients, and we started making all of these things. I could show you the pictures. They were incredible. It was a chicken dish. It was a big, huge salad. It was an eggplant dish. It was pistachio pudding. I'm forgetting what else we cooked, but it'll come back to me. And we did this with our kids. So I had both of my kids there. We did this with another family, and it was just amazing talking about, why are we doing this? Who is this helping? And then the next day, our friend delivered the food to the 2 families, directly to the 2 families. And she said they just, were saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And after that day, I've been like, what else can I do? I feel like that moment for me, for some reason, just now I'm on a mission to figuring out what more I can do to help other people. Not that, I've dedicated my life for the past 12 years to building, our company to help people, but this was on a whole different level. And I don't know, I feel like it's these kinds of moments that we need to somehow figure out how to remember.
And this is great because there's so many, I mean, when it comes down to it, a lot of these that we're talking about, like we're talking about these massive events, but a lot of times it also becomes these personal things that matter to you, your family, your friends. they'll say like, wow, I wouldn't even think that this was an issue you'd be involved in, or why are you involved in it? And that becomes a story in itself. So perhaps your kids 20 years from now will be doing something similar and say, yeah, when we were kids, we actually, made a meal for this Afghani family. And it really made us feel good.
What I also remember about that night wasn't just what we did, but actually it was what Melanie did, because she was just opening up her home so that she could teach us and our kids how to live her values, which were helping others. She's incredibly philanthropic, and she is always doing things to help everybody else. And I think getting to witness somebody else doing that, even for us, and teaching us how to kind of live the way that she lives, was also something incredibly meaningful, and that we'll remember and now can try to pass down. I want to be like her, right?
Yeah.
I hope that one day I'm inviting family friends and their children over to make food for people in need. And actually, the next day we were out, and we were downtown in Washington somewhere, and there was like a polar bear plunge going into
the really?
river. And there was this giant event happening. We weren't part of the event.
Oh, come on. We need footage of that. That's what
we were walking by. We're like, what's happening here? And they're like, it's a polar bear plunge. And we're like, okay, we're not doing that. And Wawa was one of the sponsors.
Love Wawa. I'm a Wawa fanatic, by the way.
Well, I know. That's why I mentioned this. And so they were walking by, and this woman who's manning the Wawa booth was like, do your kids want a box of stuff? Because we have way too much here for the event. So we said, sure. She hands us this giant box filled with cookies and water bottles and brownies and apple slices. It was this amazing box of stuff from Wawa. And my daughter Winnie said, we should go find some homeless people that really need this. And so we did. And we were driving, we found under a bridge, there was this tent, this group of tents. And we went over and delivered this giant box of goodies from Wawa and said, would you like this? And they said, are you serious? And we said, so it's just, I think that one moment with, cooking food for Afghani refugees leads to a next day of delivery. These kinds of things can start to snowball and then become the kinds of things that make up the people who you are.
Yeah, and they become really good habits too, because you see something, it's true, like it's easy, and now getting bombarded with so many issues and so many things like, where do I go? How do I help? Am I doing enough for this? But I do think that picking and focusing on those things that you can do a lot of times just around you, people that I know that work at rescue shelters, people that work for certain causes, people that help maybe, go by and read stories for like elderly or war veterans or people that don't have, just to spend some of that time, it makes a difference. And it makes the person feel good that they're helping, but it also inspires you to want to do more of that. It's very rare I've seen people that have helped someone and afterwards they're like, oh, I'm never doing that again. And if they have, they're usually someone I don't like to talk to that often.
And these are the types of conversations that are important to have with your family or family friends or other people that you value, to learn how do they live their values and what kinds of values do you have, and can you start to pass on? What kinds of charities were your parents involved in? What kinds of charities do your kids want to get involved in? What kinds of things really speak to you? And then those become the things that you can spend time doing, investing in, investing time, investing money. And those become the kinds of things that we pass down from generation to generation.
Yeah, it's true, because I know my parents, like my mom, she would cook and bake all the time. And when I was younger, all the time she would sell to stores, all that money would go to charity. She's like, this is just something I like to do. And it does kind of make a difference. And a lot of times people, if they're like thinking if just money isn't, because we're always thinking of things like, okay, money's one thing. What's other efforts we could put towards helping people? And it is important, because at times we started discussing issues about like documenting historical things that how they affected you. You know, people shouldn't write a thesis on like, you know, the Vietnam War or like September 11th or pandemics. It's about how did it affect you as a family? And it could be told, like you said, straightforward, like this is a timeline of how things were. And this is how I felt at these times. Or it could just be an overview of like how it changed you or how it affected you. Because there could be people that said, you know what, it really didn't affect me as much because I lived in the middle of nowhere and I'm used to not seeing people anyway. So really it just meant when I went into town, I had to put a mask on. And it wasn't, you know, it affected them in the sense that they weren't being able to see family. And then I think as people start digging in, they're going to say, you know what? Yeah, I did miss this graduation and I didn't get to take this trip and I didn't get to see my parents as much and I couldn't visit my mom in a nursing home. So it becomes a longer story that you could then tell that your family can take in, because taking in all the information from everyone is just too much. So we make it smaller.
The way that we feel is that we lost so much during our time during COVID, but we gained so much as well. And the fact that my kids were able to live with their grandparents for 10 months, it just would never, at least the way our lives were going, never have happened. And the fact that we got that time together it's just incredibly precious and will definitely create memories and definitely be something that my kids are talking about. And frankly, they got to know their grandparents in a way that they never would have before.
Yeah, that's true. Most people, it's like there's things like that people take out because, again, if people take all the negative, then you can't go forward. It's just too tough. It's too tough. You have to find those moments that are like, okay, what did go well? What did work out? What behaviors? You mentioned you having online Zooms with friends you never had before. Same with me. As my friends, half of them moved to California and some are just scattered around. We made a thing every month. We'll have a call, usually on a Sunday night. And we'll just chat about dorky stuff, talk about comics and movies and what's going on in life and just kind of catch up as if we were together, which is something that would never happen. And same with talking with family. I know grandparents got used to using an iPad to talk to their grandkids, but that sense that it's not so odd if a grandparent called the kid on FaceTime, because we're just so used to it now. It's not such a strange feeling anymore. But I think documenting those and then also figuring out what causes do matter, what events did matter to you that affected you personally, and how it changed your behaviors towards certain aspects. Because it could be interesting that someone could say a cause didn't really resonate with them until all of a sudden they did meet a family that was dealing with something. And then once that happens, it does become this pattern of, okay, how can I help other people? Because I do think some people feel a little helpless in situations where they're like, well, I could give money, I could do that, but they feel like they're not making a difference. But when you see the difference made, when you see the family that you're helping, rather than saying, you know, you might not be able to cure a disease, but you could help someone who's suffering from that disease in a way that could be as simple as hanging out, talking, getting their stories so their family, so it becomes part of yours. Because a lot of times there's things I guarantee that I remember that if I told that person how much of an impact it made on me, they'd be shocked. They'd be like, wow, did I even tell you that story? I'm like, yes, you did. And it made an impact on me, because you forget. And then that person probably feels like, wow, I had no idea. A lot of times you don't realize.
Have I ever made an impact on you?
All the time. All the time, Abby. Nothing but impacts. Constantly. Sudden impacts over and over. But I do see like how much you like I could see with you cooking and you caring about that. It's something like you'd be like, hey, I'd like to do this and tackle this thing because you want to get things done that way. And I don't think you look at it as like too big or too small. You know, it's like, I think in a team meeting when I quoted, I think it was Roosevelt, it was like, do what you can with what you have where you are. That kind of mentality is like, okay, I can't be everywhere, but if I could impact people in my neighborhood, if I can impact people in your own family and your own friend circle, then perhaps it can grow beyond that. And you could feel like you're making some kind of accomplishment. Because I know for you, for me, having that purpose, if you're just doing something for the sake of it, it doesn't feel right. So there has to be some kind of like underlying purpose that's moving forward, whether it's getting better at something, learning something, helping someone. And I think that's why, even as we were writing the book, like it's not just a joke, frivolous book. We're like, we want to help people get things in order. And a lot of times it gets taken however people view it, whether it's for today, whether it's for 20 years from now. But I think that totality, and as we dive deeper into these areas, you realize how interesting they are and how it really is about not only helping other people, but jogging our own memories. Because if you were to sit down and think about like the pandemic from your perspective, it really will help you cope with it better, I think, too.
Yeah. And I want to know what were the events in my grandparents' lives that they went through? What were they feeling during those moments?
Yeah.
How did it how did it affect them? But what were they thinking? Like, how did they handle it?
Yeah.
Because maybe those feelings or those lessons could help us today.
And maybe they're exactly the same. Maybe that feeling of uncertainty.
Figure out something about yourself that's, just genetics, been passed down from your grandparents to you, or just a personality trait. It could just be very interesting. Because
we like to think they're all so tough and they went through it and just like, oh, we were tough and we ate dirt and, walked 30 miles. But the reality is they're like, we were terrified. We had no idea if this was the world coming to an end. We had no idea if our families would ever be the same again. We had and then figuring out, well, okay, you did make it through. And how did you persevere beyond that? And how did it change your behaviors in the future? Because perhaps for us, we want to think about how do we prevent certain things from happening? I think especially in offices, it's like, how do we prevent just even the flu and other sicknesses going around? Because we know at our office, you work in an open area, people come in and one person's sick and they want to feel like a hero. I'm going to work through the day. And then all of us are sick and we're angry. We're like, no, stay home. And maybe these little things can help us change those behaviors so people like are a little more respectful or mindful of moving forward, so we could all be healthy and all work together. And ideally, that's where I think everyone wants to get. But I think it has to start kind of small among families and people being on the same page there. And then it can grow out from outward. But the first thing is, start writing it, start documenting it somewhere. And it doesn't have to write. Take your phone, start recording little videos.
What we did during COVID was we just started creating a list. I just created a Google Doc, cool. And we just started a list of memories, like random things that happened during our time here together, because it felt too important while it was happening. And so crazy obviously for all of us. So we just started jotting things down. I wish we had kept it up. We didn't actually keep it up. We only did it for the period of time that we were together, not realizing things were going to continue on for over a year. We should have kept it going.
But I think that's great. So that's a good start. Starting a list.
One thing I did was on my iPhone, I had in my notes app, I have a thing that says pandemic heights and weights. And I charted my kids' heights and weights throughout the pandemic just to see, because they weren't going to the doctor.
Doing some frontier medicine. I had to pull three teeth during the pandemic. And I
did have to, my sister gave me a haircut. But anyways, nice to talk to you today, Gene.
Yes, great. And I think it's important. Like, these are things when